I believe that people gravitated towards YouTube because it wasn't corporate, because it truly was YouTube. There was a focus on real life. There was a focus on authenticity. None of this fakery. What you see is what you get. Today I thought I would talk about something that I've noticed for a while, and it's what I call the morphing of YouTube into CorporateTube. And I first noticed this around 2018. I'm sure it started before that, but that's when it became obvious to me. And since then, it's only gotten much, much worse. And if you ever look at your YouTube feed on the side there, you'll see a lot of stuff from different TV channels and news stations, and just a lot of big names, big corporate entities, or channels that have big corporate entities behind them. And I think there's a problem with that for several reasons, but in my opinion, one of the reasons, or probably a major reason why there's this shift from YouTube to CorporateTube is, well, first of all, I believe that, well, they're always changing the algorithm as far as that goes, but I believe that it was a deliberate changes in the algorithm to favor the big boys, so to speak. And I'm sure that a major motivation for that, just like with most things in life, a major motivation is money. The big boys tend to have big pockets. So I'm sure that's a huge factor in all this, in this shifting of, instead of seeing YouTubes by regular people, you see all this slick corporate stuff. I think another reason why we're seeing this is because TV's dying, cable's dying, and all the big names in TV and all that, they know that. They understand that. So what do? They take a look at YouTube and say, hey, man, that's where all the cool kids are hanging out. We got to go there. So right now they've got a foot in both worlds. They still have all their broadcast TV and cable stuff and streaming and all that, but they want to get a piece of the pie. They want to get a big piece of the YouTube pie. So they jump to YouTube. And the problem is, of course, that the bigger presence they make, that means that the smaller guys are going to get squeezed out, and it's increasingly harder, I think, to discover videos and clips and stuff that are not from the big guys. And so because there's a lot of money behind these guys, they can of course, they're more well known, so it's kind of a default for a lot of people. But the thing is, they're more well known, so there's more eyeballs there, so they can bring in more advertising revenue. So from that purely financial or business perspective, you can understand why YouTube would tweak the algorithm to favor that kind of stuff. But the thing is, it's creating more and more of an uneven playing field, and so that makes it increasingly more difficult for little-known creators to get a break. It's not like it was, back in the, 2005, 2008, around in that time. It was a completely different world back then, 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. And yeah, it makes things difficult. Now, perhaps I'm naive, but it's my belief that one of the reasons why people were migrating to YouTube in the first place rather than cable TV and all that kind of stuff is because people are tired. This is my belief. People are tired of corporate fare. They're tired of all the slick programming and slick production. And they're tired of watching somebody parrot the narrative. They're tired of somebody pushing the propaganda. And face it, if you want that, you can pay cable or you can, sign up for cable and pay for the privilege of getting all that stuff. You can pay for the privilege of being propagandized and so on. But YouTube used to be more of a haven from that kind of stuff. And I think that's why people were gravitating more towards YouTube. Also, another thing too is like Hollywood in general, and of course I'm focusing more on like TV personalities, but movie personalities, TV personalities, they have this reputation, and I think it's a well-deserved reputation. They have this reputation for being kind of plastic and fake and inauthentic. So in other words, they project some persona to the public, they're this or that, but if you get them behind closed doors, it's a totally different person. Yeah, so they project one thing, but the reality is something different. And so a lot of people, they're sick and tired of the plastic stuff. They're sick and tired of all the fakery, and they want something real. And like I said, maybe I'm naive, maybe I'm the only one that thinks that, but I believe that there's a lot of people that fall into that category. They're sick and tired of all this plastic nonsense, this illusion that we're fed by the corporate world and by Hollywood and everything. And I believe that is a major reason why YouTube took off in the first place.
That was a win.
I believe that people gravitated towards YouTube because it wasn't corporate, because it truly was YouTube. There was a focus on real life. There was a focus on authenticity. None of this fakery. What you see is what you get. That's the way it used to be at any rate. And still I believe there's, corners of YouTube that are increasingly harder to find, but there are corners of YouTube where that still is the case. They're on YouTube, they're started off, and like I said, it's still somewhat there, but with regular people doing YouTube, not CorporateTube, but YouTube, there was a focus on honest opinions, not being fed some line because they were paid to do that, right? There was a focus on content. There was a focus on substance, not on slick packaging or programming. I know that's what I'm looking for. I don't need to see a billion channels in my feed that are giving me all the corporate stuff. I want to see what the average Joe and average Jane has to say, what they think about what's going on or that kind of stuff. I don't want to hear talking heads. I want to hear real people. YouTube's always changing their algorithm. They're always playing games with it, and somehow the games that they play always tend to favor the big guys. And it's putting smaller, or it poses dangers to smaller creators, such as myself, and I'm sure there's many others. I'm sure you know some too. You're in danger of being squeezed more and more by these corporate entities. And if that weren't bad enough, there's also increasingly competition from AI slop. And so I'm sure you've run across these channels. You can tell, that there's, fake voices and all that kind of stuff. And And I can understand that people want to be efficient and make good use of their time. And to a certain degree, when AI is used as a tool rather than a crutch, that's one thing. And I'm not so much opposed to that, although I think there's still some philosophical problems with that. I haven't quite settled down on that, but there's something in the back of my mind that says, wait a minute, we got to think more about that. And when I get that sorted out, I'll put a video up on that. But so I can understand using AI as a tool rather than a crutch. But the thing is, you've got a lot of entities that are just churning out tens or maybe even hundreds of YouTube videos, AI slop, by the day after day. And when they're putting out, say, 100 or more videos a day, your average guy, your average YouTube creator can't put up with that. They can't keep up with that stuff. So you may have heard of the so-called dead internet theory. And I think more and more it's becoming evident how that's shaping up. So yeah, if you're talking to somebody online, how do you know that they're a real person? It could be bots talking to other bots. They even got that kind of stuff going on in job interviews, believe it or not. They've had like with the whole job search process, they've had the HR people have had automated sifters or sorters for resumes and stuff like that. And then, so it's hard to get your resume seen by a real person to begin with. And then they were doing the so-called video interviews where it's not even a real interview. You just sit there and talk to a camera, and then they use AI to evaluate your response. And then if they like you, maybe then you might get a real interview. But, I know this is an aside, but I'm already down this rabbit hole, so I'll just continue a little bit. But so some job seekers are flipping the tables, and they're using AI to answer the interview. So it's like you have a robot interviewer and a robot job seeker communicating with each other. So I mean, it's just ridiculous. But you got that kind of thing potentially, probably, most likely going on the internet. So you read comments. How do you know they're from a real person or not? Things like that, the dead internet theory. But back to my original point about AI slop. Real people, regular people, small-time creators like such as myself, you can't put out hundreds of videos a day. Are you kidding me? Especially if you're working full-time. So yeah, we're facing competition from the corporate guys. We're facing competition from AI slop. It's tough. And so I would just ask you, what do you want? What are you looking for? Do you want, plastic stuff churned out by some big corporation, or do you want some, fake AI created video where you can tell just by the voice that it's all AI generated and everything is contrived? Or do you want reality? Do you want plastic people, or do you want real people? I know what my answer is, but what's your answer? What would you do? What do you favor? So, yeah. Let me know in the comments. What do you think about all this? What do you think about the increasing prevalence of CorporateTube as opposed to YouTube? I hope this video has given you something to think about. Please give it a thumbs up and share with a friend and subscribe. And let me know in the comments what you think about all this. I will talk at you later. Bye.